I've been wild camping now for about 10 years, and I've been lucky enough to pitch my tent in some fabulous locations. Poor bivvy. And in that time, I must have tested hundreds of bits of gear. Well over 100 tents. I've encountered torrential rain, gale force winds, biting cold. I've even danced a couple of times with lightning. And through all of that, I'd like to think I've learned a thing or two about surviving and thriving in the great outdoors. So I thought today I'd make a video sharing some of the experiences that I've had and things that have worked for me when I've been out camping and backpacking. So whether you're a seasoned pro or you're just new to camping, there's always a thing or two that you can learn. I'm learning stuff all the time. So light your stove, put the kettle on, sit back and we'll get into it. Might as well get into the controversial bit straight away. Tip number 1, wild camping is not a criminal offence, but you do have to be mindful. But it is important to understand that it is a civil matter, and landowners have got the right to protect their property really from trespassers, which in effect is what you're doing in most of England and Wales anyway, with the exception of Scotland and some parts of Dartmoor. Pretty much all of the rest of the land here in England and Wales anyway is privately owned, but the reality is nobody ever really does that. In all the time that I've been wild camping, I've never been asked to move on. I've always found somewhere that is far enough away from people, or that doesn't have incredibly easy access for quad bikes, which is the preferred choice for some of the landowners at the moment when they're coming to move people on. Places like up on the plateau of Kinder Scout, high up in the mountains in the Lake District, no one is ever going to ask you to move. But there are places that I have camped before, such as Bamford Edge, Stanage Edge, that I know now that land managers or gamekeepers are heading up to those places on quad bikes and they're moving people along, so I wouldn't go to those places anymore. I've been lucky enough to be able to camp there several times before, but I just wouldn't risk it nowadays. The reality is that nobody gets prosecuted for wild camping. If somebody comes and asks you to move, you just move. Make sure that you don't damage the property in any way, shape or form. Well, you could be prosecuted for criminal damage, so as long as you're behaving yourself, you're well out of the way, you're going to be perfectly fine. And if you want to do wild camping, you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're going to be a trespasser. The way that I see it, you're not hurting anybody. Be as discreet as possible, pitch late, leave early, and you will be fine. And moving on to number 2, choose your location wisely. Now there's nothing really to be afraid of here in the UK. We don't have any big predators like bears or wolves. Probably the most dangerous animal that we've got is an adder, but in all my years of hiking and camping I've never seen one. They're very shy and timid creatures, and as soon as they feel the vibrations of your footsteps they slither off into the bushes out of the way. So I'm going to have to hold my hands up and say that I don't always pitch up in the most sensible of locations. I'm a sucker for an epic view, and I want to pitch my tent or my bivvy bag in a location that as soon as I undo that zip in the morning, if there's no clag anyway, I've got an incredible view. But those locations tend to be pretty exposed, and if the wind comes along then you're going to be in for a pretty uncomfortable night. You are much better off pitching up in a sheltered area, in a dip, behind a hill, behind some rocks, anywhere where the wind's not going to really affect your tent. I've had many an uncomfortable night where my tent's been blown all over the place, where if I had chosen a more sheltered location, I might not have got the best view in the morning, but I'd have got a better night's sleep. Another mistake, although it's not always my fault, I still make today, is not pitching on a level bit of ground. Things might look level, but if you pitch your tent on an uneven bit of ground or somewhere that's slanted, you usually find in the middle of the night that your sleeping pad and all your gear's just slid down into the corner of your tent, or you've had an uncomfortable night because there's rocks underneath where you put your sleeping pad. Obviously in places like this you can't always guarantee a perfectly flat pitch, but take a little bit of extra time and find the flattest pitch possible anyway. Try not to pitch right on the path. Look out for the game trails in the grass as well, because you don't want rabbits or deer even running through your camp in the middle of the night. While I'm on about pitching, quick tip about pegs. So not all pegs are equal, but as all things in life, I find you get a better result if your peg's longer. I do find that in really windy conditions, if you've got a longer peg, something around 9 inches or something like that, then that holds in the ground better. With a longer peg, your tent is much more likely to survive the night. That's what I've found anyway. There are one or two exceptions, like if you're pitching in really soft ground or loose sands, you're going to need a different type of peg altogether, but that's probably for another video. Right, number 3, gear matters, but not as much as you think. You don't need to spend a fortune to go wild camping. I started out with really basic kit. Most of it was army surplus. And then if you really get into the hobby, you can just upgrade as you go. Some things you might never really need to upgrade. You can buy your gas stove for 10 or 15 quid that you might not need to replace for years. Roll mats are cheap as chips and really durable. They're not the most comfortable thing in the world, but they will do a job and last for ages. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've never beaten that feeling that I got from my first time doing this style of wild camping. That was with basic gear, and I've used a lot more expensive gear since then, and it's not improved the experience anyway. The most important thing is that you've got the essentials, so you're going to need some sort of shelter, sleeping pad to insulate you from the ground, a sleeping bag to insulate you from everything else, and some waterproofs. You don't even need a stove. Take a packed lunch with you, but just make sure that your gear is up to the conditions that you're going to be camping in. I've had a few uncomfortable nights where I've pushed the limits of sleeping bags and sleeping pads. It's a tough lesson to learn, but make sure that you've got gear that is rated to below the temperatures that you're going to be sleeping at. So before I move on to tip number 4, I quickly want to give a shout out to Squarespace, who's kindly sponsored the video today. So we've been using Squarespace now for our websites for a number of years. Both myself and Joe have got no idea when it comes to web design or coding, but it's been really easy. All we had to do was choose one of their ready-made templates. We uploaded our own photos, swapped the text around a little bit, and within a couple of hours we've got a website. Both of us have used our websites to set up online shops. Squarespace provide a full e-commerce facility, so taking payments is really easy. So with the built-in SEO, I now rank on Google, and the website's been a great place to promote both my YouTube channel and my online raffles. There's loads of other features that I use, including email marketing, and Joe's favourite is the analytics, where you can see which part of the world all the traffic's coming from. So if you fancy having a go at building your own website, then click the link in the description below, or head over to squarespace.com/Paul Messner. You'll get a totally free trial, and when you're ready to go live, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Moving on to number 4, buy the best gear that you can afford. I remember my mate Ben telling me that buy cheap, buy twice, and a lot of the time that really is the case. I find it's been the same with any hobby I've done. You tend to buy the cheapest entry-level gear, and before long you're wanting to upgrade all the time. So if you start off buying something that is decent quality and affordable, it's going to last you longer. And if you're not sure if you're going to like it or not, it's a really good idea to either borrow some gear or buy second-hand gear. That way I feel like that you're not really risking any money at all. Second-hand gear tends to hold its price really well. So if you were to buy a bivvy like this and you paid £150 for it second-hand, if you didn't like it, you could sell it the following week or the following month, and in most cases get your £150 back. Make sure to do plenty of research and try and buy gear that's going to be suitable for the type of camping that you're going to be doing. So if you're only going to be camping in the summer months, you do not need to spend £1,000 on a 4-season Hilleberg all singing all dancing tent. You can get something for a fraction of that price that will do the job that you need perfectly well. And one thing to remember, expensive gear doesn't always mean good gear, and cheap gear doesn't always mean bad gear. Number 5, don't believe the hype. There's a lot of people out there, including myself, that get sucked into all of this fancy marketing that the gear companies put out there. Maybe you've just bought the latest plastic water bottle, and then 2 weeks later there's another fancier plastic water bottle comes out with a bit thicker plastic, but it does exactly the same job. I get frustrated by companies that make incremental upgrades. They might have ideas in their head that could make the perfect tent or the perfect action camera now, but they don't want to give you the perfect action camera this year. What they want to do is give you a little bit each year, so you keep coming back and buying the next best thing. I know it's not camping related, but things like the iPhone. I used to upgrade my phone pretty much every year, but I skipped the iPhone 15. Instead of upgrading your kit every year, upgrade every few years, and then maybe you notice a difference in performance. And also, getting sucked in by the hype can lead to impulse buying, where you're buying stuff that you don't really need. It doesn't add to the experience, and before you know it, you need an 80-litre backpack to put all the crap in that you've accumulated. Number 6, organise your gear effectively. I'm not the best person when it comes to actually storing my gear. I can't always put my hands on the thing that I really want. If you've got it organised, one, it will highlight if you've got too much of something. Maybe if you've got all your stoves in one location, you might find that you've got 30 of them. More importantly, organising the kit that you put in your backpack. Now, there's lots of videos out there that show you how to pack your backpack, but that's not necessarily the right way for you. Make sure you've got easy access to the things that you need. So if you've got a medical condition, for example, there's no point in having your first aid kit with your medication right at the bottom of your backpack. Think about the weather. If it's going to be raining, you want your shelter close to the top of your pack, or somewhere maybe on the outside of your pack where it's easy to get to. You want to be able to put your shelter up first so you can unpack your backpack in a dry environment. Water to stay hydrated, snacks to keep your energy up. Just make sure you've got a system so you know where things are when you need them. Number 7, always check the weather forecast, but never trust it. If you live in the UK, you know that the weather is unpredictable, and the weather forecasters don't always seem to know what they talk about. I've got a number of different apps that I use, from the Windy app, the Met Office app, Mountain Weather Forecast, and it's very rare that they all say the same. There's some things that you just know anyway, and you don't necessarily need the forecast. Winter is going to be colder, so you're going to need more cold weather gear. But in times when the weather can be changeable, I always pack for the worst case scenario. Make sure you've got a plan if things go sour. I've learned that the mainstream news outlets like BBC or ITV Weather, those kind of things, they're more generic. Up in the mountains or up on Kinder Scout, it's almost like it's got its own climate or its own weather structure. You can often get really bad weather up there and it'd be perfectly fine down in the valleys below. It's the one thing you can't rely on, the weather. So number 8, at some point you are going to get wet. If you are the sort of person that gets outdoors regularly, you go camping regularly, at some point you're going to get caught out in some rain. Obviously make sure you've got your waterproofs with you, but even then, waterproofs are allegedly waterproof and breathable, but the fact is that I've never found any yet that do both at the same time. If I've got waterproofs on for a long period of time, I usually find that I'm wet inside anyway, from just the vapour from my body heat not being able to escape. I'm not going to go deep into it, but the rainwater clogs up all the pores in the membrane and doesn't allow your body to breathe, basically. So you are going to get wet, so make sure that if you're camping, especially in colder weather, that you've got a spare pair of dry clothes to change into. Once you're wet and cold, if you haven't got dry clothes to change into, it's very difficult to warm up. And if you end up with hypothermia or pneumonia, then it's not a good place to be honest. Number 10 is just about food and drink. Make sure that you have got plenty of water to stay hydrated. And when you're hiking, you're sweating quite a lot, so constantly keep sipping water. I recommend taking some kind of water filter or purifier. For me, that's been a lifesaver. There's been occasions where I've even been able to get water out of a puddle or a rock pool. It can make a massive difference to things like having a hot drink when it's cold. Food as well. You don't have to just have pot noodles. However, dehydrated food is the easiest, I've learned. It doesn't weigh anything, it packs really small, it doesn't really take any cooking. You're simply pouring hot water into it, leaving it for a few minutes, and you've got a meal. At the end of the day, if you're out hiking, especially if you're doing multiple days, I've learned that the important thing is just to get some food inside you. It doesn't have to be steak and asparagus, although that is nice to have, and it makes sometimes for an interesting video. A couple of years back on the Cumbria Way, I was tucking into a dehydrated sweet and sour chicken, and it felt like I was eating from a 5-star Chinese restaurant. It was that good. When you've been hiking all day, sometimes just getting some hot food and some calories inside you really quickly is just a ticket. Obviously keep plenty of snacks close to hand inside your hip belt pockets, or get a little bum bag. I wear a bum bag all the time. Not very fetching, but it's ideal for things that you're going to need quickly, things like snacks. Number 12, make sure that you've got a backup plan. Things don't always go as you want them to. Even simple things like you've got a location in mind, and when you get there, someone's already there, and if you've left it a little bit too late, you could be shuffling around in the dark trying to find a place to pitch. Give yourself plenty of time. For a long time now, even if I've just been out for the day, if I walk past a potential location, I've pinned that location, and then I've got it there as a potential place where I could camp in the future. Or if I need to move on because someone's in my spot, I've got somewhere to hand. Make sure you know where you're going if you need to get off the hill for some reason. So I've been caught in lightning twice. The first time was really scary, but we had an easy route back down to the car. So we packed up in torrential rain and just got off the hill as quickly as we could. But the second time we were caught in a storm in the middle of the Cairngorms, and when the thunder and lightning came, if we decided to bail, we'd have had to go over the tops of the mountains and then still walk for another 10 or 12 miles or something like that. We weren't at the highest elevation, and we decided that it would be safer just to ride it out rather than make us be the closest thing to the sky. There's lots of other things that could go wrong. You could injure yourself, which I've done a couple of times. I've had to hobble back to Keswick before, halfway up to Walla Crag. Your gear could fail, you could break a tent pole. Make sure you've got repair kits for things like that. I also always carry one of these with me, which is a satellite SOS communicator. Now these are quite expensive, but you can get that facility on a lot of phones now, so just some way of being able to call for help if something goes wrong. I also let Joe know where I'm going to be parking the car, the route that I'm going to take up, and roughly where I'm going to be camping. So then if for any reason she doesn't hear from me by the time that I say I'm going to be available to speak to her, she can call for help if need be, and that gives the rescue services somewhere to start anyway when it comes to looking for you. Number 13, lightweight gear isn't always the best. So when I bought my first round of wild camping gear, it was great. But then I went down the rabbit hole of buying gear that was lighter and lighter and lighter, just to try and take a little bit of weight off my back. I should have taken a bit more weight off my front, which would have made things a lot easier. But, at some point you are sacrificing, or I found that you're sacrificing comfort just to save a little bit of weight. I'd rather carry a little bit more on my back but have a good night's sleep. So I've tried sleeping on sleeping pads that are literally millimeters thick, and I just don't sleep at all. So what is the point? I may as well carry a self-inflating pad that can maybe 400 grams but have a good night's sleep. So it's all about striking a balance between comfort and weight. So I started at this level, started going for the lighter weight stuff, and as I got older I wanted comfort more. So for me, comfort is king every time. You've got to find out what works for you. One thing I will say though is don't pack your fears. So don't pack a spare stove just in case one breaks. Don't take 2 sleeping bags just in case one's not going to be quite warm enough. Don't take 4 spare t-shirts in case you get wet 3 times. You don't need all of that gear. If you start packing for everything that you think might go wrong, you'll end up taking a trailer with you. Number 14, don't be afraid to abandon ship. If things are rotten, you're having a terrible night, the wind is blowing you all over the place, there is no shame in just packing up and going home. You've got nothing to prove to anybody. I used to quite enjoy challenging myself and seeing how I could cope in really testing conditions, but the older I get, maybe a little bit wiser, wild camping for me is about the enjoyment of it. I want to be able to soak up the views. I want to be able to chill out and relax and sort of bond with nature a little bit. I don't want to be fighting it. I don't want to be holding on to a trekking pole all night trying to keep my tent up. There's been quite a few times when I've pulled up to the car park where I'm just about to go wild camping and it is belting it down with rain, and I've thought, you know what, there is always another day. So I've driven home and just saved it for an opportunity or a time when I'm going to enjoy it more. Don't get me wrong, I do like to have a little bit of wind blowing through my hair every now and again, but I don't want that to detract from the experience of wild camping. Number 15, respect the environment. Anybody that's looked into any sort of camping or wild camping before must have heard the phrase leave no trace. So when you've packed up and gone in the morning after you've had a night on the hills, make sure that the area that you've been in is clean, tidy, exactly how you found them. In some cases, better than how you found them. So if you find a bit of rubbish that is not yours, but you can put it in your rubbish bag, do so and help clean things up a little bit. When you think about it, we're just guests on this planet for 70 or 80 years for most of us. All of us are responsible for protecting and looking after the place. Number 16 is take some kind of first aid kit. I don't take a full-on first aid kit. I've just got one that I've made up myself. It's got basic things in like Leuco tape, a few plasters, a little bandage, tick tweezers. I don't take things like splints or burn kits with me or anything like that. You can get a first aid kit the size of your backpack if you wanted to, but I find if I've got anything more than a blister or a small cut, then I'm going to need specialist treatment anyway. So it might be a case of air ambulance and mountain rescue or something like that. But when you're out camping, it is easy to have little accidents, or even things like muscle strains and stuff like that. I take ibuprofen with me as well, just because it really helps for me. So I always make sure I've got something with me to treat the little ailments. Number 17, fire. I'm just going to put it in one thing: fire, stoves, fuel, all of those kind of things. So just be really vigilant and careful when it comes to fire. Things like this, dried grass. I've got a table on here today just because I knew that this area's got a lot of this dried grass with it. So I want to make sure that my alcohol stove, which can be sometimes, if you're not careful, dangerous alcohol, because if you knock it over, that's sugar. I always get these two mixed up. Yeah, if you spill a stove or something, or you knock your pot over and then this catches the flame, the whole thing could go up. So never leave a fire unattended. Most of England and Wales anyway, you don't have fires. I know in Scotland that it is sort of tolerated in places, so I'm not going to go into that, but you've got to be really careful if using a stove or you're cooking inside your tent. Make sure the tent is well ventilated, because you don't want a build-up of any sort of gases or anything like that. Keep the flames away from your fly sheet, because that could end in disaster as well. And another good thing about the dehydrated meals is they don't splatter fat everywhere like steak and asparagus does sometimes. So you don't want oil and grease all over the inside of your 1,000-pound Hilleberg. Number 18 is wildlife. So just be wary of your surroundings and what potential wildlife is in that area. There are certain areas in the Lake District where there might be things like red kites and stuff like that are nesting. You don't want to be pitching your tent anywhere near some of those kind of locations. There are occasions where birds or animals won't go back to their nest to feed their young because there's people around. So just be wary if there's anything that you do see that you're not pitched near those. I've already mentioned game trails. You don't want a deer running across your bivvy bag or anything like that. I always check the area where I'm pitching, because I have before pitched the tent up and then gone round the corner to put a peg in and realised it's on an ant's nest. So just be careful of things like that. And I have learnt my lesson before when it comes to the UK's most, what's the word, vicious predator, midges. The odd times that I've forgotten my head net is usually the time that midges come and attack. So, and they are horrible. I can't think of anything worse than being eaten alive by midges. If it's happened to you as well, you know what I'm talking about. If you take anything from this video, make sure you take a head net with you. So number 19 is about navigation. Now, we've all got smartphones now and fancy watches that tend to do all of that for us, but there are occasions where it's good to still know how to use a map and compass. Occasions when the clag really rolls in and you can't always get a good signal for certain things, or if you need to abandon camp in the night, or you're going to be pitching up late in the dark, being able to follow a footpath or follow a compass bearing and being able to locate certain features and things like that while it's dark. So you're going to need a head torch as well, which is another thing that obviously that's part of your kit list. But being able to have those skills has been invaluable. Even last week when I was up on Gardham's Edge, the footpath that I came down to get back to the car was not actually on the OS maps, but there's quite clearly a footpath there because I walked along it. So don't always rely on technology, don't always rely on the map. You know, your compass doesn't usually lie, but just make sure you've not got it next to the magnet of your microphone or something like that, because that can alter your compass points. There's that old famous slogan, not all those who wander are lost. But not everybody that's on the hill knows where they're going either, so yeah, brush up on your map and navigation skills. Right, number 20. Enjoy the solitude. You come to places like this just to soak up this view, soak up the atmosphere. The peace and quiet is much easier when the weather's nice. When you've got no wind, no rain. If you are new to wild camping and you've not done it yet, make sure you try and pick something, although I've said don't trust the weather forecast, when the forecast is going to be pretty good. You will enjoy it a lot more, I'm sure of it. Use the time that you've got to put the world to rights, to clear your thoughts, just to recharge your batteries. Really, soak it up. Use the opportunity to learn a few things as well. So while you're out and about, take a few photos of things. If you're not sure what things are, maybe a new plant that you've never seen before, or maybe some carvings on a rock that you don't know what they are, take the photos, go back home and research them, and you can learn lots of new things. Most people who love camping don't get to go out as often as they want, so when you do get out, just make sure you make the most of it. For me, the key things for successful wild camping are preparation, making sure you respect the environment, and just be prepared for the unexpected. So make sure to let me and everybody know in the comments below if you've been wild camping before and you've got any really great tips or learnings that I might have missed in this video. And if you've enjoyed this little chat, make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.